Do you hear me clapping on the steps all the time? No? I hope so. So, welcome back with the art of making movie props. So, let me introduce you to Mr Muir. You might be not familiar with his name, but I'm sure you love and you know his work very, very well. Our special guest is a veteran in the film industry who spent approximately 50 years in working on blockbusters. So, and he is one of the most respected sculptors in the industry. You can find his handiwork in Alien, Indiana Jones, Harry Potter, James Bond, Tomb Raider, Guardians of the Galaxy, and of course the most recognized work of his is the Darth Vader helmet. I'm sure you know it already. So, just a warm-up question. How do you like Budapest so far?
Sorry, what?
How do you like Budapest so far?
Oh, it's beautiful. We've enjoyed the Parliament building. We went on a tour. It was absolutely lovely. We went to the zoo yesterday, which we've not done for many years. We went with our kids and our grandchildren. But yeah, I mean, that was fabulous, the zoo. It must be one of the best in the world, without a doubt. And yeah, I mean, Budapest is beautiful. I actually came here way back in 1976. And I stayed here for 6 weeks in the Gelliot Hotel and worked on a film called Prince and the Pauper. And fell in love with Budapest way back then. It was very different then. I mean, there were Russian troops on the streets with Kalashnikov rifles, and so that was a bit unnerving. But I love Budapest. It was lovely then, and it's even nicer now.
Thank you. It's very nice to hear that. So, how did you choose sculpting? How did you end up in this industry?
Well, I actually didn't really get into art till I was about 13. And I discovered that I could draw quite well and paint. And by the time I came to leave school, I was really interested in actually having a career in the art field, but didn't think that I'd ever get work anywhere. But luckily for me, as I finished school, there was an apprenticeship as a sculptor down at Elstree Film Studios, and they'd turned down 12 before me, but for me it was lucky 13. I went for the interview and got on quite well with the old guy that was the sculptor there at the time, the resident sculptor. And I got the letter on my doormat a week later saying that I had the apprenticeship. So I was at Elstree for 4 years working on British films, which were only small at the time, but sculpting, going to college 2 days and 2 nights a week, and actually doing life modelling, life drawing, wood carving and all that as well. But when I came out of my apprenticeship at the age of 20, because the film industry in England was in such a poor way, there was no films, no money. I was made redundant the day I come out my apprenticeship. So I thought, well, that's my career finished. What do I do now? But luckily, again, I got a job outside of the film industry up in London, and I did prestigious work all over London. And at the age of 20, I'd work unveiled by the Queen of England. And at 22, I did 40 Scottish shields for the Scottish Corporation in London. That was unveiled by the Queen Mother. So I had 3 years doing really nice work, and then I had a phone call from the old guy I trained under. There's a film going into Elstree. The film was called Star Wars, and would I go in and do some strange characters? So I jumped at the chance to go back into Elstree and back into the film industry. And the day I got there, which was January 1976, I started on the Stormtrooper Armor. And it was made to fit anyone from the height of 5'8" to 6 foot, because they had 50 stormtroopers. So I sculpted individual bits so they all married into one another. It comes across as a complete suit, but it isn't actually. And in that way, we could make it fit all the different people. Above 6 foot, the gaps would get rather large and it would look wrong. And below 5'8", the armor would overlap and would look wrong. So, yeah, I mean, it worked.
It worked amazingly, I think.
But, I mean, it was after that, I went on, the lady that had been doing C-3PO, she left the picture. So I had to do all the finishing work on C-3PO. And then I had a call from the designer saying, can you pop up to the office? We have a new character for you to start. And the character was Darth Vader. And he said, go down to the wardrobe and see the wardrobe designer. He's got a little drawing for you of the mask and helmet we want you to do. And when I went down there, it was just a small drawing, a line drawing, no sense of shape or form from one angle, and that's what I had to work from. So they actually moulded Dave Prowse, who played Darth Vader, and they reproduced him in plaster. So I had a plaster Dave Prowse to work on. So everything that I sculpted on top of that plaster model, I knew would fit back onto Dave Prowse afterwards. So I started with the mask, front and back. But Dave Prowse was so claustrophobic in the mask and the helmet that they discarded the back and just had the front and fixed the helmet to the front of the mask, back of the mask, and actually that's what he wore. I also did the chest armor, the shoulder bells and the shins for Vader, and that made that complete. But I had a great time working on it. Funny thing was, I never met Dave Prowse on the film. Although I sculpted on his plaster figure, I never met him. But I met him many a time in later years doing conventions, and I would often be sitting next to Dave Prowse, so he would be signing stuff and I would be signing the same photographs, or Darth Vader helmets people would bring in and get me sign one side and him the other. So I did get to meet him and got to know him pretty well.
And did you know that this is going to be so huge in the future? Did you have the feeling?
No, I think most of the crew thought that it would be a bit of a flop. Like, science fiction films weren't that good at that time. But Star Wars was so ahead of its time, and the same pessimistic crew that thought it was going to be a flop, we went to, a year later in 1977, we went up to London to see the crew showing. And when you see that spaceship come over, everyone, there was a little round of applause. But at the end of the film, this same pessimistic crew stood up and gave it a round of applause, standing ovation. We were amazed. We realised that we'd worked on a film that was fantastic, well ahead of its time, and it's shown it. It's carried on all these years later and got fans all over the world. Even in China now, we went to China a few years ago, and China had only had it 5 years, but we went to Beijing and they did a convention there, and it was so popular. And funny thing was, whereas with Star Wars, it's mainly young, older guys and that like it, and younger guys and kids now as well. But out there, it was women. The women loved Star Wars, so it was very nice. Enjoyed it there.
I'm glad. I think the fan base is diverse here. I would say that in Hungary, everyone likes it. So.
Yeah.
So a very important question. How do you start working on a project like, what are the steps of making an interior or a helmet like Vader's?
Well, I sort of mentioned what happened, that they moulded and cast Dave Prowse and I sculpted on top. But there's so many different departments. So if you've got a big set and it's an interior of a palace, you'll get the riggers that do all the metal work. They'll start putting the rigging up to the shape. Then the carpenters will come along and apply woodwork to that. Then the plasterers will come along and put all the moulding around. Then all the detail, if it's a detailed coat of arms or it's part of the integral part of the building, then I would sculpt that and then the plasterers would mould it. And if they cast, they might cast 20 caps out or really ornate detail, and they'd be the ones that would fix it. So I would do the sculpting back in the workshop, and then it goes through the system before it's fixed up on stage. And what you're seeing back here is a series of, just a selection of bits and pieces on different films that I've worked on, just to give the audience an idea of the work that you do within the film industry. But I mean, as well as moulding and sculpting in clay, we do big polystyrene figures and that as well. I mean, like on one of the Bond movies, GoldenEye, we did all the big Russian statues that had been taken down in Russia at the end of the Cold War and actually put into an area. So on Bond, they had this area, and Bond was in this statue park, and he had 5 red dots on his chest where the guns were actually pointed at him. But we had about 10 weeks, and Stalin was 20 foot high, Lenin was 17 foot high, there was head of Lenin 10 foot high, and so all those big statues, 2 of us carved that in 10 weeks.
Oh my God, did you ever sleep in that 10 weeks?
We were doing 7 days a week. As on Star Wars, I mean, because there was so much work on Star Wars and I was the only sculptor there, I worked 76 days without a day off.
Oh my God.
So I was rather tired at the end of that. And at the end of Star Wars, although I'd loved working on the film, I was quite pleased to be finished and have a break. But it wasn't for long because it was only a few weeks and I was working on a film called The Eagles Landed, a war film. And I was doing these figures for the interior. They'd been doing some shooting inside a church, but then they needed explosions and everything, so we had to rebuild the interior of the church in a field, just away from it. So I had to re-sculpt the figures that were in the church and Gothic work and all that. So I spent 3 weeks doing that, and then I had the call to come out to Hungary to work on Prince and the Pauper, which I love working on. And funny enough, I was coming back to get married at the time, and they said, would I stay on? And as much as I love Budapest, I wasn't going to give my marriage up to stay on here.
It's understandable. So which one do you like more? Working on a commission like the coat of arms for the Queen, or working on a movie project? Which one is the more interesting one or more beneficial?
Well, beneficial, it was always film work. I mean, the other work, there wasn't so much money in it. Until later on, I did a job when I had my own workshops at Elstree Film Studios. I did a job for Kensington Palace Gardens, all this really ornate work for the ballroom, and we actually paid our mortgage off with that, so it was very good. But, I mean, it was the film industry that I worked in mainly. It was the outside work was nice to do, the work was good. But film works, there was so much variety in it. Every film you did, you never knew quite what you were going to do. And it varied so much. In later years, I worked on Marvel films like Guardians of the Galaxy. That was a real fun film to work on. And some real strange characters on that one as well.
Yes.
But yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor 2 was a nice one. All the ornate work on that in the throne room. In fact, they actually called the throne room my set because I did so much of the sculpting on it. But yeah, that was really nice.
That's amazing, that throne room in the Thor too. I love that one. So do you have any interesting plans in the future, like movie plans, or you are retired now?
No, after 48 years, I decided I'd done enough, you know, doing all the hours God sends, and so I called it a day, and I've retired. I don't sculpt anymore. I've done so much of it. I sort of dried up. I didn't want to do it anymore. And I do these great shows all over the world with Ben. I give lectures at universities. I mean, in May we fly out to Zagreb to do a big show there. And then from Zagreb we're flying straight down to Split. And I'm doing a lecture there at the University of Split. And then from there we fly straight down to Italy to do a show there. So we're quite busy doing these, and we're traveling the world, seeing lovely people all the time, meeting fans, chatting away, and we really enjoy it.
It's like you are reaping the work you already done, just enjoying your time.
Yeah, we enjoy it. I mean, it's not like work. It's you know, we do very well with it, but financially. But the main thing about it is we enjoy doing it. We don't need to work or do it. We could live quite happily without. But yeah, I mean, we just love the traveling and meeting the people.
I know you really like the fans. I know you were on some web pages where you give advice to people how to do the Vader mask and something. Can you tell me about that?
Sorry, how to?
I know you went on some Star Wars forums and had a bit of chat with the fans.
Yes, that's varied over the years, but it's got to the point now where we don't have to argue the point anymore. Yeah. It's very well known that I did Darth Vader and the Stormtroopers. I went to a court case up in London about 13 years ago where the guy that did the vacuum forming over the moulds that were provided to him from Elstree said that he'd sculpted it and everything. Lucas were taking him to court, and I agreed to go because he had stolen my history. So I went to the High Court in London. He lost the court case, but he was allowed to carry on producing the Stormtrooper armor because the judge deemed it as industrial. And industrial, the copyright runs out after 15 years, whereas art is 50 years. So Lucas actually lost the copyright on the Stormtrooper. Apart from in America, he still has the copyright there. But in England, anyone can do it. And I think it's more or less that around the world that Lucas lost the copyright. But I don't quite agree with what happened, but it's fine for me personally. But I don't agree with what the judge did.
Yes, it's not easy.
But I mean, I could go on and talk about a few things on other films if you'd like me to.
Of course.
I'll tell you about Alien.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have seen the Alien that Giger did all the designs for. Well, on that one, there was two of us did the space jockey, which stands 26 foot high. The design was done by Giger, and it was absolutely amazing. His airbrush work is so three-dimensional that it made it easy to do the space jockey. I mean, you still had to work out the technical side of it for something that stands 26 foot high, that's full of detail. But, I mean, he's visually, his design made it easy to do it. He did actually, you'll probably, people have probably seen pictures of Giger supposedly working on the space jockey, but I can assure you he didn't. He was posing for pictures. But he was a lovely character, and he was very, very talented, but more so on two-dimensional work, which looked three-dimensional. I mean, there was one incident with Giger, because all of his work, and mainly it was very sexual. And the entrances to the spaceship, Peter and I were working up on the H stage at Shepperton Film Studios, and we were about to start the entrances, and Giger come in with, there's no children there, is there? No. Some top shelf magazines that were very explicit, close up of ladies. And when he left the stage, and that was our reference for the entrances to the spaceships. And when he left the stage, we looked at each other and we laughed and we said, we can't do that, no way. So what you actually see in the film are stylized versions of that. But he was a character. We used to go down the pub with him some days, but there was all sorts of other work done on the film. But the space jockey was the main job that we did on it. And when I finished on that, I went straight off to Malta to work on a film that Rock Hudson was in, a thing called Martian Chronicles, which was a very low-budget film, and the work wasn't that interesting, but you take the rough with the smooth. I've been lucky enough to have mainly nice work to do, but some films you have to do maybe rocks or something, and you just do it. You get the chainsaw out and you start carving rocks.
And what do you think, what was your biggest achievement in your career?
Biggest achievement from the fact that they're so well known is probably Vader's helmet, things like the space jockey, but there's so much other work that is better technically than those. I mean, there was a thing on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It was the opening sequence, you see the gong, and there's the Paramount Mountains across the gong with a dragon that goes across above it. And then you see the gong roll off, it's in the Obi-Wan nightclub, and all hell breaks loose. But you see a close-up of the Paramount Mountains, and they pan away from it, and then you see the gong, and it all happens after that. But I spent 2 weeks doing a really beautiful dragon that went right around the outside of the gong with the Paramount Mountains in the middle. And yeah, 2 weeks, and it was a job I was quite pleased with. And then the art department, someone came along and said, sorry, we've got the mountains at the wrong scale to pan out from. You'll have to do it again. So what you actually see on screen, I had 2 days to sculpt.
Oh my God.
That's the mountains and the dragon, 2 days. And also on that, I did the 15-foot python that comes down out the tree. The main actress, Kate Capshaw, she was terrified of snakes. And she wouldn't have a snake near her, so I sculpted a 15-foot python that was moulded. It was cast in foam rubber. And then the special effects got it to come down out of the tree onto her shoulder, and she saw it there and grabs it and throws it. And when it actually lands, you can see that it's not a real, it's not alive. It doesn't start going off or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there were things like that on same sequence. They're sitting around the fire and there are baby elephants behind them. And they wanted a close-up, so I had to sculpt a baby elephant's head. They moulded it, did it in foam, put real eyes in. They had wires going down into the trunk so the trunk would move. They had hairs planted all the way down the trunk, eyelashes. And it was a night scene, but they had close-ups. Because, I mean, they needed that for the reason being is you couldn't get a baby elephant to do exactly what you wanted as soon as the camera rolls over. So they used that for the close-ups on that. There was so much other work in the temple where you had the sacrifice that they were going to lower into the molten metal. They pour a heart out. And it's in the priest's hand, and you get the boom, 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 boom of the heart, and all the red and the blood and the veins hanging off. Well, they said, we'd like you to go and see a heart surgeon at Harefield Heart Hospital. to talk it over with him. So I went to the hospital and I was chatting with him. I said, what's the closest heart I can get to the human? And he initially said the primates, the monkey's heart, which I couldn't get a monkey's heart from anywhere. So he said in the end that the best one I could get is a sheep's heart. So I used that for the detail, and I had a plastic heart from the hospital, so they got the veins in the right places and all that side of it. And then as I was leaving, he said, I'm doing open heart surgery tomorrow. Would you like to come along and watch? So it didn't take me long to say no thank you very much. But it was fine what I did in the end. They were pleased with it and it worked okay.
And I know you made a shark too in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah. I did the tiger shark, 8-foot tiger shark that Jaws wrestles with in the Shark Tank, where he had the metal teeth. There was a great big magnet above the Shark Tank, and Roger Moore, who was the Bond on that one, got it going and lifted him by the teeth, took him across and dropped him in the Shark Tank. Well, you couldn't have one of the main actors wrestling with a real shark, so I sculpted the 8-foot tiger shark. They moulded it, do it in foam. I did 3 layers of teeth, because a shark has layers of teeth, and as one falls out, another one pops up to replace it. So that was done, and then you see Jaws fighting with it. And you also see the same shark swimming up to the actress. And obviously they don't take it past then, because again they don't let sharks tear actresses apart.
It's a very good thing, I think.
But on that same film, I had lots of Egyptian panels, lovely ornate Egyptian panels to do, because Q had his headquarters in Abu Simbel, which was out in Egypt, and they went out there and filmed the exterior of Abu Simbel, and they also filmed Karnak Temple. And it was years later that I went out on a BBC production where England and France were pillaging and getting all the antiquities from Egypt. And Belzoni, the strong man that was going out to get the stuff for England, the film was about him discovering the entrance to Abu Simbel, because over hundreds of years the sand had built up and gone right across the entrances, and he discovered it. So we were out there to carve a full-size section of Abu Simbel, which is about over 100 foot high. We were out there for about 4 weeks, and there were a team of 5 of us. So we carved this 2.5 figures of Abu Simbel down just below the knees and up to the top of the neck. And funny enough, we went to Karnak Temple, which is beautiful, and our hotel was right opposite Luxor Temple, which is beautiful, and lots of lovely Egyptian figures in, and it's just amazing. But it was nice to see what I'd seen talked about all those years earlier on the Bond movie. So, yeah, that was nice.
You could check how accurate your work was in the real life.
Oh, it was adequate for the film. It was fine, yeah. Yeah, that was good. But Bond movies, I mean, as I said, I worked on 10 Bond movies. Another one was, I think it was Die Another Day. It was where the ice palace was. Yeah. So the ice jet where you see going across the ice, I actually sculpted that in polystyrene. Yeah. They moulded it, cast it in fiberglass, even the see-through visor, I actually sculpted that, and they moulded it, made a positive shape in fiberglass, then they pulled that plastic over that to use as the visor, and you see it going across the ice, and then it dangles off of the cliff. So, yeah, that was a nice one. I also did the Swan Bed, where Bond's in with one of the lovely Bond girls. And so the bed looks like ice, but it's actually clear fiberglass. So again, I sculpted it in polystyrene. They mould it, they cast it in clear resin, and then Bond's on it with all the furs and that, and with, as I say, the lovely Bond lady.
A lot less cold than ice. What do you think? Which is more difficult, sculpting an animal or some interior design or droids?
I've always found 3D work easy, so it makes no difference to me. I love working in clay because you can do the detail really nice. Polystyrene is when you're doing great big figures and they don't want the cost of moulding a clay one and casting it and the weight of that as well. Polystyrene, those figures, you could carve one in a week, 20-foot figure. And then they just paint it to look like stone with lichen and all that on to make it look totally realistic. And you've done it in a fraction of the time. If you was doing it in clay, you'd need a huge armature that would have to be, take tons and tons of clay. So, yeah, I mean, for the big work, but you can't do the detail as tightly as you can with clay. So clay's nice to work with because you can do fine detail with it. And it's satisfying, whereas polystyrene, you can do great work with it, but it's not as satisfying because you can't do the detail quite so nice.
Yes, I think as cosplayer I can really relate to that because there were some problems with this in the past. And this is always the cosplayer struggle, like what do you choose? Which is the more efficient? Which is the more easy to work with and sculpt? And thank you so much for your answers. I think we learned a lot from this, and you have so much experience and so much history in this. It's amazing to listen to you. But I want to ask you guys, do you have any questions? Was there anything that you wanted to ask about specifically? You can come here and we will give you a microphone. Come here. Lugi? Valaki oda tud menni mikrofonnal? Sorry, I would fall off if I have to hand the microphone in.
So hello, sir. I'm especially interested in the gun in Indiana Jones, the second movie. Do you take any references while sculpting it, or is there any references from the traditional culture or something like that?
I didn't have any photographic reference. I had a drawing for that one. I didn't have to even draw that. So I used the drawing to put it onto a board, and then I sculpted it in clay. It was then moulded and cast and fixed to the gong. So that would have been in fiberglass because the movement, if it was in plaster, it could crack or break.
Yeah.
So yeah, that.
Is there any particular meanings or something in the design that you put the dragon on top of the mountain over there and then let it roll?
No, there was no special meaning in that as such. It was just the design. It was the action that came after that the scene was about, really.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Right, thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, how much time does it take to make a piece like, for example, a Stormtrooper Armor or a helmet or something like this?
The Stormtrooper Armor, because there were so many bits, I was about 4 weeks on that. Vader was a lot less. The mask was about 4 days. The helmet was about 2 or 3 days. Chest armor a couple of days. The shoulder bells were probably about a day each, and the shins were about a day and a half each. So you have to work very quickly in the film industry, and with the amount of work that I did over the years, I could do very, very quick work. Whereas, like on the last Bond I worked on, I wasn't HOD, head of department on it or anything. I just went on for 3 weeks. But they wanted the Chinese lion that I sculpted on it done in in a month, the HOD, and they said, no, you can only have 3 weeks. So they got in touch with me, and I went in and I sculpted it in 3 weeks by doing a polystyrene core and then the clay, because it was quite detailed. So yeah, you have to work very quickly, and I'm blessed with seeing things three-dimensionally quickly, and I can work quickly. So yeah, you get quite your hands, you can work right-handed, left-handed, and with wood carving you're doing that as well. You're guiding the tool with your left hand.
Thank you very much.
Or your right, whichever way you want to carve.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So my question would be that how much of your work is personal in a way? So I get that you have orders when you have to create or sculpt something, but how much of that is your own when you don't have strict orders? Like this has to look exactly like that, like a mask or something. So do you have any creative liberties in these cases?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It varies from job to job, film to film, as to whether the designer wants to do a tight design or he just leaves it to you, gives you a quick scribble, then you have more input. With Vader, I had a lot of input because it was such a simple drawing from one angle. I mean, I have to sculpt it 360 degrees. You're seeing it from one angle. So I had a lot of input with that. So it varies from job to job, film to film. Sometimes the design is quite tight, other times it isn't.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
So my question that I have seen that you have...
Can you just...
Okay. Some published books or papers on your desk. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared to buy any books, but are they available on Amazon or Google Books or in the future?
You can buy them direct from my website. I've still got books left at the moment, but you can get them from my website as such. If you see my wife over there, she'll give you the details that you need to go on.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Én nekem nem túl jó az angolom, úgyhogy fordítanám nekem passzulj, hogy miből érezte azt, hogy kiégett, és hogy mi volt az a pont, amikor abba hagyta a munkásságát? Ezt meg tudnád kérdezni?
Persze. He asked what was the point where you felt like you had enough of the film industry and you want to just retire and have a nice, calm environment?
Probably a year or two before I packed up, I'd got to the point I'd had enough. I did some nice films. I mean, I worked on The Force Awakens and Rogue One. I did Disney films as well, Snow White and the Huntsman, which had some really nice work on it. Beauty and the Beast. That had lots of lovely work on it. But I'd got to I mean, funny enough, I said the last couple of years, that was the second to last film I worked on. The last film I worked on was Rogue One. But I was tired by then, and I wanted to finish and do something different. And I have no wish to sculpt anymore. I might in the future. But I have somewhere I can do work. But at the moment, I just love doing this, so I'll carry on doing this in the future. This is what I'll do, I think.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Sorry if you already said this, but how much artistic freedom did you have when you were making something? So could you use your own ideas? Could you maybe change or was it always a concrete order from the industry?
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying just a bit earlier, it varied from job to job and film to film. Sometimes you had a lot of freedom to put what you wanted into the work. Other times it was quite a tight design, especially later, where you've got concept artists that are doing really good concepts on computer. The designs were quite tight, and that's what you had to do. but it's varied over the years.
And did you maybe have a sign or something that you put into what you made? So, you know, like, so like,
You know, when you put your name on some works.
Oh, no, never did that. No, I mean, even some films you spend, like Star Wars, the original Star Wars, even having done the main characters, I never got my name on screen.
oh,
I didn't get a credit on it whatsoever.
Oh my God.
Probably wrong, but that's the way the film industry has been. And it didn't worry me. I was making a living for my family, doing a job that I love doing. So getting my name on screen, I have had my name on many films, but it didn't worry me whether it was or not. I mean, I know people that have made it part of their contract that their name went on screen at the end. It doesn't worry me, so I never made that a point.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here and asking so many great questions. And thank you so much for visiting MondoCon and being this nice to us.